This is Grimsby, an industrial town in the north-east of Lincolnshire. It used to be home to the world's biggest fishing fleet, but has since declined. In 1970 there was 400 ships, however in 2013 there are only 5. But still, 70% of all UK fish processing is still processed here. Nowadays, Grimsby does not have a very good reputation. It's been named as the worst place to live in the UK and to have the unhealthiest high street. Grimsby is often in the media. The song playing right now is Elton John's song called Grimsby. Grimsby has also been featured on the Channel 4 documentary Skin, which follows families and individuals living with the effects of long-term unemployment. Grimsby has even had a Sacha Baron Cohen film named after it. It's officially named as a deprived area, which are famous for the lack of opportunities. We'll be talking to musicians from and living in the Grimsby area to see what their experience of music and opportunities here has been like. The first band we interviewed was The Last of the Wonder Kids, an indie pop punk band.
All born in Grimsby.
All born in GY.
Yeah.
We're pretty proud of our background.
We're proud of it.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's...
People pull a face when you say you're from Grimsby, but you get used to it by the time.
We get a bad rap, don't we?
Yeah.
I like it. Grimsby's got attitude. Like you just get the odd comment made, I guess, the odd sort of joke, but nothing that bad.
Nothing that's held us back, really.
If you're from Grimsby as well, most people are scared of you, so they won't say anything anyway. So that works out alright.
We've been friends for years, haven't we all?
Yeah, and then we just started jamming together, and it just worked out. Like we were all trying to get separate projects on the go, and then one day we just sort of did it together.
Yeah, it came together.
It's all on social media nowadays. Everything.
I don't know what we'd do without it.
Yeah, I don't. We'd have to actually start playing better.
Yeah. There's no big promoters around here. You've got to go away to other cities.
Yeah, we find ourselves going away a lot, don't we, rather than playing locally.
To get recognised and get good gigs out of it, you have to.
Yeah, it's very rare that we play at home, which is a shame. Maybe what we try and limit it sort of one every 6 months, but you kind of got to go to the city, yeah.
After speaking to the last of the Wonder Kids, we talked to Mint.
There's a big barrier between you and everyone else because you can't associate yourself with a landmark, but at the same time you're not associated with a landmark, so they look at you in kind of like a more open way.
Yeah, like Steve Lamack from Radio 6, what did he call us? Grimsby Guitar Slingers, I think it was. Yeah. It's a bittersweet thing. If you can make it happen and you get there, it plays off in your favour that you're not from the same place as everybody else, like London, Manchester, Liverpool. But initially, we've been trying to get on Radio 1 and Radio 6 for 3 years and it's only just started to happen. So there's bands out there that we're mates with that have only just started and they've had plays on Radio 1 and stuff. And it's because they're from trendy places. From a political sense, there's loads less jobs here than there is many other places. It's a very white town, it's not very multicultural, it's very backdated. However, it's not the worst place on earth. We've played worse places and it's got a lot of charm, this place.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to have a Nando's around here, but other than that, I love being from Grimsby,
There's a modesty and I don't know, you've really worked to get where you are when you've come from Grimsby.
Yeah. I think every time something's happened, we've been booked for a big festival or, I don't know, we've got a radio play or we've been on TV or something. There's always an army of people from Grimsby and Cleethorpes that are probably more happy than we are.
It's reactive, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really, really supportive. We played on Radio 1, we had this big party and it wasn't just a Mint thing anymore, it was a GY thing. It was everybody was stoked that a Grimsby band did it sort of thing. So it's more about Grimsby than it is all. doing all the important shit. Like, and I think that's pretty important because, like, realistically, no one important's ever going to travel to Cleethorpes to come, like, you know, give you your big deal or whatever. We was always spoke down to from that, you know, the upper shelf when we were first starting out, and I think that's something that should change. Nobody ever threw us a bone when we were starting out, you know what I mean? But we'll help anybody out. It's definitely not like underdeveloped.
There's just potential.
Yeah. I think we need to stop letting the council spend so much money on fucking flowers and all the shit they do down the beach, and actually just progress forward in like culture. You know when I don't know, like a woman leaves a man because the man cheated on her or something, and she might have a new fella and she might have a new dog and house and whatever, but she's still like a bit bitter about it. That's like Grimsby. They'll never let go of like the fishing industry or whatever. So like whenever people like say, oh, there's nothing around here and whatever, it's like
It's not true.
it's not true completely. Like, we need to move on and we need to develop and stuff.
There was a pub called the Fisherman's Arms.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, the Fisherman's Arms, so closed, and now it's back open. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
It's totally fine. They probably went on holiday.
It's such an easy target to slag off, but I think it's great round here, man.
Both the Last of the Wonder Kids and Mint are the new wave of modern bands from Grimsby. They both talked about how they had not received prejudice other than the occasional comments and jokes. They are also proud of their background, even if they feel it is harder for them to get where they want to be. Next we'll be talking to some of the older bands from Grimsby. The first person we'll be talking to is Luke, a member of the band Stand.
Stan was formed by me, my mate Ben, and a lad called Bestie. As we started inviting like bands from out of town to come and play here, and specifically from like Europe and stuff, we would put gigs on in Grimsby. Then like your network grows, so we would start to kind of like go travelling around the country, and then eventually we like made it out to Europe. So we then started putting on like all dayers, where we put on like 10 different bands from like all around the country in like the hardcore punk scene, and like people from all over would come, and it'd just be carnage really. None of us had any money, whereas like there's a lot of bands from London and stuff like that they come from different backgrounds or whatever, or they go to like, specific music college and that, whereas all of our music was done outside of even school or anything. Music actually in the end helped us get out of town in a way, like, 'cause it was like by being in a band, we got to like leave town every weekend and like go to different cities and like play gigs and things like that. It was really tough, and especially just even like Grimsby's location, it's it's an hour and a half until you're anywhere, in any direction, and then it's like, and then you've got to get to everywhere else, sort of thing. It's like, it's a geographically like cut off place as much as it is like financial and socially. It still looks like Grimsby's got the same challenges it's always had basically, which is just like the fact that it's a town at the end of a road, without a road going through it. So it's like, you only come here if you've got a reason to. Basically, you don't pass through Grimsby. It's often in the poorer areas and the more disadvantaged areas where like really good stuff actually bubbles up, because there's a deeper need for it. Done a lot of different stuff. I'd put on a lot of gigs here, and like I ran a record shop here for a bit. I just sort of, once that ended, I just felt like getting out and like seeing somewhere else. So yeah, I moved to Sheffield basically. The Odd Day Start Experiment was set up alongside everything we were doing at the time. So there was like, we were in Stand, and then there was loads of other bands, like, there was Imbalance in town, and there was a band called Andy, Glenn and Rich, who they went on to be Elk. Odd Day Start Experiment was set up to basically like be the record label to release all of that. I think like Ben, who was in Stand, he originally set it up, and then, but because we were all in the same band and all best mates, I just like would help him out with it more and more, and then I got really involved. And then it sort of got passed to me, like in the end. I just ended up running it, for a lot longer basically, and then taking it over to Sheffield and stuff like that, putting on bands from there. The whole thing was kind of a bit like a family. It's like whenever somebody from our old friendship group, or like from people from Grimsby that we knew from the scene, whenever they do something new, we'd always try and basically like put out their new record or whatever, if we were still mates. We just actually closed like the Odd Day Start Experiment like label after 15 years. We just kind of decided that it had like run its course a bit, and was like quite a perfect thing. in itself, so we stopped that. But these days for work, I still work in music basically. I do music PR, so I'm just like working on album campaigns all the time. We did everything ourselves without any money or without being paid and stuff, and if anybody was into it, then we thought it was amazing. So we had no chip on our shoulder, I guess. So that really helps me, like when I'm, doing PR for other bands, or like if I'm like managing other bands, which I do as well, do a bit of band management, and just to kind of, keep people's feet on the ground, I guess, in a way, like really helps. Yeah, I just find that, I don't know, I'm proud of where I've come from, and like the backstory that I have to like all the music, the things that I absorbed in like Grimsby. I'm really appreciative of where I get to go. Whenever I go to gigs and stuff, or I'm working for a certain band, I always think like, this is hilarious. Like I'm just a lad from Grimsby, and like I'm like backstage at this thing. Like, how did this happen?
The views of Luke from Stand seem to echo the newer band's responses. He talked about a really strong sense of community, something that seems to have been missing in recent years. However, bands like Mint seem to want to bring it back, and they offer help to any of the other bands on the scene. We next talked to Snake Davis, who's been a professional session musician for many years.
Hi there, I'm Chris Davis, otherwise known as Snake Davis. Lots of people don't know my real name in the music business. I've been making my living for the vast majority of my life as a freelance, self-employed musician. It's a real mixture of session work for other artists, for film, television, radio, and working as a sideman, touring with artists bigger than myself. Really, these days, the vast majority of my work is working as myself, doing smaller shows and putting out my own albums. I spent my formative years in South Wales, and of course there's a great history and culture of music, especially singing there. I lived there till I was 16 and sang in choirs, church and school, competitions, concerts, all that kind of thing. Enjoyed it, loved it. It was my first taste and introduction to music. By the age of 16, I had a bit of piano and a bit of guitar under my belt, but I hadn't actually thought about the wind instruments. My family moved up to North Yorkshire, obviously I went with them. I ended up at Leeds College of Music. A slightly mature student, spent a couple of years there. Went off on my first professional job, which was on the cruise boats sailing around the Caribbean, playing for the mostly American tourists. I lived lots of places after that. I lived in York, I moved to London, lived in Hertfordshire, Buckinghamshire, and eventually floated up to North Lincolnshire about 10 years ago. I moved to North Lincolnshire because I met a lovely lady in Cleethorpes who became my wife, Sally. Technology and good road networks, doesn't really matter where we live. If a youngster is prepared to travel a little way, a wonderful facility in Scunthorpe. There's a fantastic one in Doncaster, and occasionally I get involved with youth schemes in Hull and Grimsby. There's a lot going on, and there's some great teachers around. It's never easy pursuing education and career as a musician. The opportunities are definitely still there in this area, and no less than most areas in the UK. But one has to really make an effort and go out and find it and make things happen. But it's all possible here. Whether you live in North Lincolnshire or the north of Scotland or London. The advice is similar really, and that is obviously practice and work hard. Teaching is so important, and teachers are so important, and sometimes we need to search to find the right teacher for us or the best teacher. It's not necessary to stick with just one teacher. It really can make or break you finding the right teacher, even though these days there's so much. Go out and make opportunities. We're not all pushy, confident people, to pursue a career as a performing musician. You have to develop that side of you. You have to learn to love being on stage, learn to love performing. You can make those things happen. You can go and play in your old primary school. Teachers will always welcome you. You can play in church, play parties on your own. You can meet up with friends and form little bands, duos, trios, quartets. Go out and make things happen. And work hard and make contacts. Just be a nice person, be easy to get on with, be helpful. I hire musicians a lot these days. Have done for the last 20 odd years. I always book the person who's on time, has a smile on their face, is helpful, and doesn't whinge and moan, rather than the person who's perhaps that little bit further on in their playing, but has a negative attitude and a black cloud over their head. The opportunities to go and play in recording studios for money, they just came along the way. One of the very first things I did was for Granada Television. I was approached by a keyboard player who was writing some music, and he said, would you come and do a recording session? And one thing led to another, and your name gets around. And I found that having a dual career as a performing artist and as a session musician, sideman, that became a lovely and interesting and lucrative and demanding and exciting part of what I do. Throughout the 80s and the 90s, I was doing so many recording sessions, sometimes 2 or 3 a day. One of the sessions I get asked about quite a lot, I think because it sold so many records, and sax was a massive part of it, was Take That's Amelia Love Songs. That was an exciting job to do, but it was just one track along with a dozen or so other ones in an afternoon session. And in fact, people were amused because if I work it out, I think it worked out I got about 12 quid for Amelia Love Songs because of all the other music I was playing that day. But that's fair enough because it only took me 3.5 minutes. So I only got the opportunity to play through it once. People say, oh, you don't need to be in London and live in London, but it's absolutely not necessary. My gigs this weekend, for example, one's in Middlesbrough, one's in Halifax, and then my next move is flying to Japan for 2 festivals. So none of that requires me to be in London. I have a great fan base in the north of England. Technology has changed things massively, but the heart and soul of the industry, I think, hasn't really changed. It's still about making music and getting on with other musicians and making an artist sound great, or doing the best performance you can, or making somebody's record sound as best as you possibly can. There's less bombing down to big studios and timing with the location thing, because recording technology has got so much more sophisticated and cheaper, so I do most of my sessions right here. I'm just a few miles from Barton-on-Humber, and my number one venue now is the Ropery Hall in the shadow of the Humber Bridge. That's such a great venue, and the fans that I have in North Lincolnshire are amazing. Met some great musicians. I'm really hoping not to move again. I'm very happy to stay right where I am.
After speaking to Snake Davis, we talked to another industry professional, Barry Whitfield.
Yeah, I was born in Grimsby, lived all my life in Cleethorpes until I went to university and came back here eventually. I mean, I've toured the world, but I've always been based in Grimsby, Cleethorpes. There was an opportunity to dep with a band that was playing at a place called the Sands Club on Cleethorpes Promenade, and I did that for a holiday and then got the job full time. Then auditioned a couple of years later for Norman Wisdom, and then spent a number of years touring the UK with him. From that, I started working for a company called North of Watford Music, then started working in Black Lace, so that's when things started happening. So people might have known a thing called Agadoo, which is what I did with Black Lace. I did some television appearances, but that was with Norman and some other people. I worked with Sir James Galway on a couple of occasions. Albums and all the various singles that Black Lace did, and worked with a band called Smokey as well while I was doing that, and various other little bits and pieces. There aren't as many good opportunities anymore. You used to be able to quite easily make a living out of going into the music industry in various guises, but that's not always possible, and it's not always something that I'd recommend to anybody. So the number of opportunities has decreased, and they're more difficult to find. They're still there, but it's not as easy. When I was doing music festivals, when I was still learning the piano, all the classes, the junior classes would have upwards of 30 different people in each class. The senior and open classes would still have between 12 and 18 or 20. So there were a lot of musicians competing really for places. People like former head of music here, David Parker, Martin Pickering, who sadly died, my own wife. We were all doing music festivals, and there was a lot of things happening. That doesn't happen much anymore. There are music festivals, but The numbers of people in classes is down to single numbers, and in some cases there's just one person in a class. So that sort of gives you an idea of how things have altered. There is a local element, but I think the idea of music as a study and as an enjoyment is a national problem, not just a local problem. MAPAS, Music and Performing Arts Service, have lots of different things that they offer. They have orchestras, they have world music, which is something that we didn't have. There are opportunities in some schools, but not in all schools. I think the local area does its best to support. You take a place like the Moon on the Water, which tries to support local talent, and there are places in Louth where you can see local songwriting talent. There are open mic nights still available. So again, it's this idea that the opportunities are there, but they're few and far between, and they're more difficult to find. If you try and learn your art, your craft, and you use social media as much as you can to promote yourself, it's quite feasible, and there have been successes. Certainly if you were in a city that had, say, somewhere like the British Institute of Modern Music, or these colleges that specialise in teaching people how to get on in the music industry. When I was working in the band, we were doing a lot of work in and around South Yorkshire, Nottinghamshire. So there are whole towns and villages built up around a mine. As the mines closed, life became very difficult in these mining villages. So clubs closed, so there wasn't any work. We could work the whole year round, every night of the week if we liked in those days. That's not there anymore. I don't think our problems are any worse. Obviously the fishing industry has struggled. There are other industries growing up now, so I don't think we're particularly any worse off than any other major town or city. Well, it's the area where I was born and brought up. House prices are cheap compared to the rest of the country. As I approach retirement, when you look at possibly moving to another area, you'd end up starting a mortgage again just to move, because anywhere outside this little corner of England is going to be more expensive than Grimsby, Cleethorpes, Birmingham.
Throughout all these interviews, one thing has come to light. People agree that the musical success is not based on where you're from, whether it be affluent or deprived. It's the way in which you seek the success. All these people we've talked to have pride of their area, whether they live here or not. Maybe Grimsby isn't as bad as the media makes out, because these people definitely don't feel that way.